this time of year, you've got spring trainings going, NCAA tour, obviously the tournament, NBA, NHL going on, NFL draft is gearing up, racing is in full
Racing is
swing.
going.
Can't forget that.
Yeah, no, like
It's also
it's
the road to WrestleMania, mind you. The Thursday and Friday of the tournament,
yeah,
first week of the tournament, might be the two best days
in
of
the sports
sports.
calendar. Tough to argue that those 2 days are not the two best days. When it comes to Thursday and Friday, you don't care anymore.
Right.
And it is truly about the name on the front as
Yep.
opposed to the name on the back.
Yeah. Now, I know it's not quite, the NCAA CBS song there.
Sure.
But still gets me jazzed up to be back on the Twisted Errors podcast with you, Mr. Doug Marsh.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, "Oh, wow. It's time for one shining moment here. The ball is tipped,
It's that time of year. We are in mid-March, mid to late March, and it is the madness has begun as we
Madness
sit
has
here
begun.
recording this. So myself, Rob Stott, along Doug Marsh here for the Twisted Errors podcast, latest episode, diving into what else would you talk about during the month of March, but March Madness and the
NCAA tournament,
NCAA
man.
tournament. Man,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good time. Good time of
It
year.
is.
Almost
It is.
it's like arguably, I know we talk a lot of sports and like favorite sports and things like that, but like this time of year, there's everything. Like if you think of outside of March Madness and like
Sure.
just the scope of what's going on, like you've got spring trainings going,
Mm-hmm.
the NCAA tour, obviously the tournament. You've
Mm-hmm.
got the NBA, NHL going on, and NFL draft is gearing up. Like there's just racing is in full
Racing is
swing.
going.
Can't forget that.
Yeah, no,
It's
like
it's also the road to WrestleMania, mind you. So,
WrestleMania. I
there's so
always
much going on.
it's March Madness, but technically the championship is in April,
Yep.
and the championship would always be on Monday, and then like the Masters would follow that
Yeah.
week as well. So it
Golf.
was like,
Yeah.
oh man, just the good stuff. You're right.
It
It's a
is
great sports, and even old man yelling at Cloud Cynical, the tournament is still tough to beat.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the era of transfer portals and
Yep.
NIL and all the outside crap that we talk about, the tournament is still pure and
Mm-hmm.
true, and you still get excited, and it's still David versus Goliath stories, and it's still
Yeah.
great players to see that you've never heard of because they're freshmen. And you're not going to hear of them again until 5 years later when they're a star in the NBA or whatever. It's just
Yep.
that stuff it's just weird. However, it's still great to see the tournament and passion and kids hitting buzzer beaters and going
Right.
crazy.
The
It's
Cinderella
amazing.
stories. I mean,
Yes, the
I don't want
Cinderella
to
stories and all that stuff. It's like it's really is a perfect storm of just like you say.
awesomeness.
You know,
It's just-
pro sports is what it is, but it doesn't have the passion that you have for the school you went to.
Mhm.
So you add in the passion of your school along with competition, along with, you know, buzzer beaters and tight games and all this stuff. And you get this recipe for just an awesome event. And it's still an awesome event. And we have tried to kill college sports like crazy with
Oh,
all the
left and
stuff
right.
that's going on. And the fact that this thing is still a beautiful, event and the whole,
I mean, one
yeah,
of the most engaging across the
oh,
country, if you think about it. Like I
you
forget
know,
a couple years ago, maybe last year, Sports Illustrated put out a number. You could look it up every year. I'm sure it changes, but like, and it's a wide range. Don't get me wrong, but like anywhere from 60 to 100 million brackets are filled out. So
yes,
like, there's people. I know people fill out more than one. I've tried to over time stick to my one and
sure.
stay pure in that regard, but like people can fill out more than one, and it
Hmm.
is what it is. But like when you have that, like hundreds of million, tens of millions, we'll say, of people, you know, engaged in following the sport, whether they're doing it because it's the school they went to, or doing it because they run through a mascot bracket and fill it out because what
Yes.
mascot would beat what mascot, or what their favorite color is, or the
Yes.
coin flip,
Coin flip is
coin flip bracket.
amazing.
Like there's so many ways to stay engaged with this tournament over a 3 week period too. Like
Hmm.
it's not just a. That's what's awesome about it. If you ask me, like there's playoffs and postseason and things like that, but this is like a 3 week thing of just this event,
Yeah.
and it's just like from the first. Well, I know we've got the first four we could talk about, but like when
Sure.
Thursday kicks off,
Yeah.
and you've got games from 10 a.m. to 10, 11 p.m. Like that is the Thursday and Friday of the tournament,
Yeah.
first week of the tournament might be the two best days
In
of
the sports
sports,
calendar.
right? Like,
It's
I mean,
tough.
it's just constant. And
It
oh
is it
man,
is tough to argue that those 2 days are not the two best days. I we obviously we can get into this. As I've aged, I have lost interest in college basketball. There
mm,
are numerous reasons.
sure.
I I've watched maybe 2 games this year. I don't pay attention to it anymore. I hate the one and done stuff. I know this old man yelling at clouds. I don't hate it. The kids can do what they want to. They're just playing by the rules that are given. I
Yeah,
just don't like the rule. But it changes the. I don't know who any of these people are or any of that stuff. But when it comes to Thursday and Friday, you don't care anymore,
right.
and it is truly about the name on the front as
Yep,
opposed to the name on the back,
100%.
because I don't know any of these kids, but I know Duke and I know UNCW's name and I know Louisville and I know
Yeah,
UCLA and I know all those, and that's still the same name on the front.
yeah,
And so that's what makes it so amazing. And even though the kids may be only there for a year and they're all about money now or whatever, when the ball is tipped, they still have the exact same passion that these kids have always had. And you can tell it because they're going to give everything they've got and they're going to go bananas when they win and they're going to start crying when they lose. It's
yeah,
just, yes, the outside has changed, but once you're on the court, the kids are the same. They still care and they still love it. And that's what's so amazing about that tournament.
yeah,
Granted, we don't have the Leitners and Grant Hills and Bobby Hurley's on the same team for,
yep,
4 years, but we know one player because we've known him since he was 13 or whatever. They're much more known in the high school AAU times, but still, it doesn't change the fact that it's still an awesome event and
yeah,
just you know, but you're right. I will say this once again, as the old man yelling at clouds, I don't care as much about the championship as I
right.
do the first
The first
weekend.
couple days. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's a weird thing because typically, like, say the NFL, for example, those first couple of rounds of playoffs are huge, but then the Super Bowl is it's like
is
the
the
ultimate
event. Yeah.
biggest thing ever.
Mhm.
I think this is backwards.
I
I don't
I
really
I
I
think you're
don't really
right.
care who wins. It's that first
Yeah.
weekend that is
It's like
what's so amazing.
at the risk of jumping ahead, it's like whose bracket can survive, right?
Yes,
Those first couple of days, because that's where the madness occurs. It's
that's
like
where it
what
is,
13 seed's going to knock off a four, and like,
Yeah,
could we see another 16 after all those years of never having a
never
16 beating a
happening.
one? It's happened now, so like, could it
Twice.
happen again?
Yeah.
And then there's the occasional 2 and 15 upset. Like it's those things that make it so intriguing this first
Ooh.
weekend
Okay,
of
Rob, stop. You
uh-oh.
mentioned 2 versus 15. Little trivia. I'm going to try to throw some trivia out at,
All
at
right.
you to stump you here from time to time. Um, they don't start fully seeding the 64 until I think 84, 85. So
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was 48, 49, 50, 52. There was a random amount of teams. But once they did, then you had 116, 2 versus 15. It's I think 6 years maybe before a 2 beat a 15. Do you know the first 2 seed to lose to a
Oh
15?
man. I feel like I should because I'm probably
Pretty close to it.
yeah. Am I wearing a shirt for it?
You're wearing
Yeah.
a
I
shirt.
knew Syracuse was the first two to lose.
For Syracuse
Um,
is the first 2 to
I
lose
don't remember
to
who they lost to though.
Richmond as a
Richmond? Okay.
15.
Well, A10
Yeah.
school. Were they in the A10
Yeah.
at that point?
No, they were
No.
they were still Colonial, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it?
But isn't that wild?
It
You
is.
know,
What now? What year was that?
I
Do you
think it's
know that?
91.
91? Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, the 90
Oh,
91 season, so 91 tournament.
gotcha. It's
Yeah.
sad. The school for what's crazy, and I, I have an interesting perspective when it comes to the tournament because you mentioned the small schools, and like I know
Hmm.
where I went. Our colors here for this podcast. Those that I feel like we dove into it early on, but for those that
Yeah.
don't know, the colors of the Twisted Era podcast and our branding and our website are all about our colleges.
Yep.
So got UNCW over there and Duquesne over here, and we're mixing and mashing the colors. But um, Syracuse was my like school
Yeah.
growing up, like that who I followed, and like there's a couple reasons for that. I had an aunt that went there. I was a fan of it, and the communications aspect and wanting to get into
Sure.
communications. They
Massive.
got the Newhouse
Hmm.
School that's like tops in the country. That
It is.
is the kind of the place everyone wants to go if you're in communications, and
Hmm.
if you're a Bob Costas, you don't even have to graduate from there. You can just get an honorary degree from the Newhouse School. But
Yeah. And start covering the Syracuse hockey team, right?
right, right. So there's ways, but also like the wife, she's from there, so like
Yeah.
that's how we met and shared interest over Syracuse and basketball and things like that. I had the Donovan McNabb connection to the Eagles,
There you
so I
go.
mean there was like Marvin Harrison went there and was a Philly area resident. Went
Hmm.
to Roman Catholic High School, played with Donovan, so like there's just all of these random connections to Syracuse that make me be a fan. And one of my first tournament, experiences of following it is in high school. So I get to high school 0203, and who
Okay.
goes and wins the tournament? But
Oh yeah.
Syracuse. You had Carmelo Anthony and that whole squad, and him being a freshman. And
Yep.
winning the tournament and leaving, only spending a year there, but him still having all the time. So I get the big school look at it, right? So I
Hmm.
followed Syracuse. They had all that success and getting to Final Fours, and they've fallen off a cliff since. The Jim Boeheim eras have gone by the wayside, and he probably stayed there a decade too long, and
Yeah.
didn't allow a real transition to happen. But so I know what tournament success feels like. But then I also get the excitement of going to a Duquesne and while we were there, we got to an A10 final, and
Yeah.
I think it was '09. We lose to Temple, but I'm like in a bar watching it and like getting all excited about the prospect of going to the tournament and being at school for a tournament. And ultimately, last year they get there, and
Yep.
there's still that school pride that like oozes out of you. And watching them not even just get to the tournament, but then go and knock off a BYU, so
Yeah.
like get to experience a tournament win from the other side of the state. But so I know what it feels like to be spoiled and have that tournament success, and
Hmm.
think that you should be there every year and getting to the Final Four every year, and um, and then the complete polar opposite side of things, and what it's like to have a school that all you want to do is get there and
Just get there.
experience a little bit of March college basketball. So it's a wild thing.
It is. So like I know I'm UNCW kid. We weren't that great when I'm there. They were transitioning. We had a pretty good year my sophomore year. Got beat, got upset in the semifinals of the tournament. That means your season's over. Back then they wouldn't even give NIT bids to mid-major schools. We had no shot.
Right.
And it just didn't happen while I'm there. But about say 6 years after I left, they finally made the tournament, and it was like a big deal to get that banner in Trask is where we play. It's a
Hmm.
beautiful place, but it's 5,000 seats, and we don't care. We don't have any other. We don't have football or anything, and so the atmosphere there is amazing. It's great. So they raised the banner, right? You made it. You're CAA champions, which means you made it to the tournament. It's so cool. Well, 2 years later, again, win the CAA championship, go back and, like you said, win a game, and it was the coolest thing ever to win that game because as a mid-major school, when you hang the banner, they put a star if you won a game. And so when you go in, the banner has not
So
only that you
awesome.
were champions, but now you've got that star to
Yeah.
show we won a game as well. And it's like
That's sick.
so cool. But that's, you know, the big schools don't even,
Right. I was just trying to quickly look on the side here.
yeah.
Schools with the most Final Four appearances. Like the the obvious one, and that's probably what they're hanging in their gyms and
Sure.
whatnot is like the how many what was our last final
Final
keeping
four.
track of the Final Four appearances, and I
Right.
can think of the Dukes and the UNCs and Arizonas and all those schools
UCLA.
that
Yeah.
UCLA's and it's just a very different world
It
that
is.
those big schools operate in, and it's a wild one.
And it's nothing to take away from them because that's super cool too. I
Yeah.
Carolina. So I am in college tournament from 92
Hmm.
to 96.
Yep.
That's my tournaments. And so in that time period, Duke wins, uh, Carolina wins, and then Duke loses in a championship game in Charlotte, and then
Wow.
I think Carolina loses in a Final Four. So over like 4 years, they were there. They won it. Duke won it once. Carolina won it once, but they were in the Final Four all. And so the state was just like you're spoiled. Even if
Yeah.
you don't root for either one of them, it's still cool. Carolina has Franklin Street. It closes down, and they paint the place Carolina blue, and it was 93, and the team
What?
they beat is that Michigan Fab Five team who were sophomores that
Yeah.
year because
It's
Duke had beat
unbelievable.
them as freshmen, and they were sophomores, and you're like, it's an incredible team, but they that sort of even though let's be honest, I hate Carolina, as a as a lifelong hater of the
Right.
Heels. You don't want to see them win, but it was still cool, to see Franklin shut down. I had 5 or 6 of my buddies that went to Carolina, and it was great for them.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, no success at all. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody will come play you. That sort of stuff. That
Yep.
was the experience I had. But
Well, one of those
um,
Final Fours we've talked about before, haven't we? Because it was 94 during our 94 season, and that's when
yeah,
Mr. Clinton, Mr.
Clinton
President,
shows
comes
up to
to,
Charlotte. Yeah,
yeah,
because
for Arkansas.
Arkansas. Yeah.
That's pretty
Yes,
cool.
we did. That was a big deal. It's not the last. 96 they play in Jersey, but those are the last two non-dome Final Fours, which is another weird thing.
Right.
They it's so stupid. They in '96 they wanted to play in New York, and instead of going to Madison Square Garden, they went across the river to I think it was called Brandenburg Arena. I think it's still there, the
Hmm.
Meadowlands or
Yeah.
whatever, and it had the Statue of Liberty on the court. And it's like you're in Jersey, man. Come on, but that's the last non-dome. That's 96. That's
Wow.
30 years. 30 years of playing in domes for this
That's
thing too, which is a
crazy.
weird thing as well. It's like, hey, for the Super Bowl, we're gonna go play it. I don't know, on a racetrack or something
Right.
because we want to make it as big as humanly possible.
It's
you know,
crazy. It really is.
every other game we've played is in a gym with
Yep.
normal,
19,000
sight
seat stadium.
lines and
Yeah.
everything. And oh, for this last really important game,
We're gonna put you
let's
all the
make
way
this
out
as let's make this as hard as humanly possible.
to watch. Just it's like one of those, let's see how big we can make it so people can fit in there, but like
Yeah,
that's not what are you watching when you're at the top row of NRG Stadium or at
nothing.
AT&T Stadium? You're literally just watching the screen at that point. I, not to change topics, same could be said about WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's true. You're
WrestleMania, you
right.
go into these big outdoor arenas
You're
playing on
right.
football field. You're putting this little 20 by 20 ring at the 50-yard line of a football field and expecting people to see it. But that's how big,
Yeah,
entertainment has become. And like
yeah.
that's you talk
Oh,
about evolution of things.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this: a classic twisted era question is like, what's your first memory of the NCAA tournament? What as let's be honest, you're a pro town
Yeah,
team. Granted, you guys got Temple and Villanova and
right.
the whole Big Five, which is now Big Six because you added Drexel, all that good
Yep.
stuff. But you're still it's a pro
Yeah.
town.
Yeah,
Not like in the
absolutely.
South, we are much more college-based towns. But I was curious, what's your first
Or
NCAA
you
tournament?
talk about so you talk about those schools, they majority of them are the mid-major variety. Like I
Hmm.
know Temple Tech mid-major now. You go back to the
Yes.
early tournaments, they were
Sure,
like
sure.
Philadelphia was like the host city for
They were
not the host city necessarily, but like they
the
ran
LaSalle's
through
and
right
yeah,
LaSalle's
yeah,
and St. Joe's and Temples
yeah,
and like they were the early dominant schools in the
sure.
NCAA tournament. But for me, I think it goes back to filling out one of my first brackets when I got to high school, and like you get
Mm,
friends that are like, hey, if you start thinking about college, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what's your college team? And like, oh, well, you go back and you think about how I followed and became, a follower of Syracuse, and it was, getting in trouble for printing out all the brackets at school, like freshman or sophomore year, and you know, filling them out and writing
yeah.
in, and having little pools with friends at school of like, who could pick the champion or who could tally up the points, the most points throughout the bracket, and like it wasn't about watching it as much as it was like almost like those early, underage gambling experiences,
Exactly.
right?
It's the gateway drug.
Right.
The tournament
Right.
is the
It
gateway
is. It
drug.
is. I probably filled out a bracket before I had my first fantasy football team.
Guaranteed.
So
I bet
I,
you did.
that's it for me.
Because it's
Is thinking
so
about that.
easy. It's like the perfect gateway into fantasy because you're
Hmm.
like, oh, here's the upset I like. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like what can
So
happen?
that's fascinating because that wasn't a thing when I was a kid.
Hmm.
It is a thing in high school. I ran pools myself, because
Yeah.
my mom, I guess the office pool would be a thing in the 70s and 80s, and you were like, what is this? Oh, it's like you put a couple of dollars in, there's 100 people, and somebody's gonna win $100. I'm like, $100? That's amazing. And come to find out, it's like about I would say you're right. It's about high school, maybe eighth, ninth grade. You start, how can I do this? And you start running these pools, and I don't ever remember any teacher ever saying anything against, hey, what are you guys doing?
It was a
But
big deal
that's
down there. Were they they were probably into it too. That's the
I probably could have got a couple of teachers to get into the pool. But so mine is a little different because we are much more
college
college
focused.
focused in the South. And you grew up, knowing, ACC basketball was
Yeah.
everything. Football, nobody cared about. You know, we had no pro anything at that time. In the Hornets show up in like 80, 88, maybe 89. So that's our first pro team. So up until then, no pros, you know. But in, I was 7, 1981, Carolina makes it to the national championship game against Indiana. And on that day, I think Ronald Reagan is shot. They attempt to assassinate President Reagan on that day.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, do we play? We know he survived, but it's still like this very weird thing. So they end up playing, and I think that's Thomas's Indiana Hoosier
Hmm.
team beat them pretty bad, beat Carolina pretty bad in '81. And I don't remember watching the game. I just remember the whole idea of, oh yeah, Carolina's in this championship game. It starts at 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever. I was going to be in bed anyway. I remember that. But the next year is '82, and '82 is iconic because Dean Smith, the
Hmm.
great coach of Carolina, had gone a lot but had never won, and so they get back, and this time my parents let me stay up and watch. So it's Carolina versus Georgetown, and this is Patrick Ewing as a freshman
Yeah.
who looked like a man. He's
Right.
18 and
Right.
already just looked like a man. He was huge, and I watched every second of that. Once again, not
Wow.
as my parents were pretty big Carolina haters,
Yeah.
but it was Michael Jordan and James
Right.
Worthy, and these guys are just, even then, like Worthy was the guy.
Hmm.
Jordan was just a freshman. He was just another player. He wasn't Michael Jordan,
Right.
and they go at it. I mean, go at it.
Yeah, they do.
Not it's an incredible game, and it comes down to the end, and nobody wants to take the shot, and Jordan buries it with what 20 seconds, 15 seconds to go up, and you get this poor kid that dribbles down. He fakes the bounce pass. He gets the Carolina guy to
Bite on it.
take
Yeah.
bite on the fake,
Yeah.
and then throws it to said Carolina guy. It's still gut
Paid
wrenching
off.
to
Right.
watch. It's
Oh,
like, yeah, you think about it when a DB gets burned and the quarterback throws a ball so bad that he throws it. that's exactly what happened. That poor kid
Man,
had to live with that. Because it's the Michael Jordan game. They're like, oh, it's the Michael Jordan game. Nobody knew it was going to be the Michael Jordan game, but it was. And now you
right?
look back and like this poor kid throwing a pass to the wrong guy. But that's my
Meant
first
that's crazy. That's a good first memory.
memory. Yeah, and part of the reason I remember that is it was on at 8 o'clock,
Yeah, so you got
and
to
now
watch.
it starts at 9:35.
Right,
You know,
right.
you have is your son
Eight. Yeah,
seven,
it'll be eight
eight?
in a couple days here. Yep,
He's getting ready to turn 8.
yep,
You know, you're like, okay, do
yeah.
I let him stay
No.
up to 9:30 to midnight
Right,
to
for a game.
watch? Yeah,
That's
you know,
the West Coast trying to keep them in like a prime
it
time out
it
there,
it
but like still,
it is,
it
but
just
like
doesn't.
I because you did it at 8 o'clock.
Right.
And you know, my bedtime is probably 9, but 9 to 10 is not that bad. If your bedtime is 9 or 8:30 to midnight, that's a big
Big
deal,
deal.
you
It's
know.
a huge deal.
So I remember that. The following year they did start moving it back because the following year is the NC State one with the, you know, that's another huge
Hmm.
thing in the state. But I did not get to stay up for that one. I taped it, so I did not who know who won. I
Wow.
wake up and I go and I press play, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
So good.
But yeah, so think about like you start getting into sports, you
Yeah,
know, and that's the first 2 years of the NCAA tournament
I think
in
you
my,
peaked.
it never did.
There's been some good ones. Don't get me wrong, but like those are
Well,
pretty iconic.
think about it like this. You got Michael Jordan shot in 82. You got the NC State thing in
Yeah,
83. 84 is a blip, but it's like two of the greatest players ever. It's Hakeem Olajuwon and Patrick
right.
Ewing, Houston and Georgetown. And then the
Yeah,
next year you
is
get
the
the
is yeah
Villanova.
the ups the big that's the big one in this area. It's like
The
the first
Villanova
the first
run is
Cinderella story.
yes, is
Yeah,
incredible. And then in the following year, 86 is Duke's run.
yeah,
It's Coach K's first run. I don't think they lost 2 games. They went like 36-2 or something like that. And then they get beat by Louisville of all teams,
wow.
you know, and then so like when I started paying attention to it, it was like one of the
You had
greatest
some.
5 year runs ever, you know?
That's awesome.
87 is Syracuse. They get beat by Indiana and shot in the corner. Keith
Hmm.
Smart hits that. And
Yep.
then 88, you get Danny Manning was in Kansas. Danny Manning was from here. He
Right.
was from our area. He spurned Carolina. He spurned Duke. He spurned Wake Forest. He went to Kansas and he ends up, you know, winning a national championship in 88. So like it was like the greatest time
Wow.
ever, you know, to be a
Yeah.
fan of this tournament. Just
And those are
awesome.
moments they still show today. Like all of those are
That's
still
where
moments
one
they still show
shining
today.
moment
Right.
comes
You're
from.
right. Right. It's
All these great
unbelievable.
things, you know, these incredible games and shots and just, you know, these a lot of these,
That
you know,
begs.
obviously Michael Jordan became the greatest player ever, but a lot of these guys that made these great plays would have somewhat of NBA career, but some of them didn't. That was it,
Well, we
you
got the
know.
first moment. Like, do you have a moment in your mind that stands out as like the most iconic moment you've
Oh
watched?
man. So the, the there's like it's hard. There would be like a
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore. You'd almost want to pick like three or four.
Right.
The it's hard to describe how good UNLV was in 91. Um, in 88,
Hmm.
we lost to the Russians in the Olympics.
Right.
And it's a fairly good team that gets beat by a professional Russian team. And that's when they're like, okay, we got to, you know, other countries can bring their pros. We're going to bring our pros too. And so you get the dream team in 92.
Yeah.
So, but that's where it comes from, us losing to the Russians. Well, in that 91 season, I think UNLV had won in, was it 90? You know, routed Duke by like 30.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yes. So they come back the following year. And in preseason, the whole team comes back that had just won the national championship by 30.
That's incredible.
It's the biggest blowout ever in the championship game. They bring the whole team back and they're going to scrimmage the Russians that were like, had beat the college kids and they destroyed this Russian team that was the
Wow.
gold medal. And from that point forward, you were like, okay, this is like the greatest team ever with, Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, and these, Anderson Hunt and Greg Anthony. It was incredible. And so they go the whole year. They don't even get touched. It seemed like the closest game they went to Arkansas to play at Arkansas. Um, and I think they still beat them by double digits. I think that was the closest game they had played all year.
Wow.
And they just worked their way through the
Ran.
tournament and they
Yep.
get to this semifinal game against Duke. There's
In
no
a
shot.
Yeah.
No shot. You are not
Right.
beating this team. And dang if Duke didn't beat them. That's still one of the craziest things, that you're like,
Was that
I
the
don't know.
Leitner shot, or is that
The
later?
Leitner
That's
shot
late
is
'94 or the
no,
following
no,
year,
it's the following year.
following
Yeah,
season. Okay.
in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. The
Spectrum.
Spectrum. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, Duke takes that game. They beat
And then
UNLV,
go on their own run.
and then they go on their own, and they only lose twice
Wow.
that
Right. Right.
following year.
That's
So they
nuts.
do essentially the same thing that UNLV did, but that UNLV team was just so dominant. There was no
Yeah.
way. It
It's
almost makes
insane.
it suspect. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh
I'm
man.
not. I'm not saying
Wild.
anything, but
Right.
these
Like what
guys were
happened?
in Las Vegas, and
I get it. Well, I
but the
if
fact,
there's
that's tough to
yeah,
beat.
if there's one moment I remember, and it's iconic for me only because I stayed up for it the night before a flight. I'm like I just do it to myself where I get on these early flights for things that I got to go to, and instead of going to bed, I stay up because I'm afraid I'm going to miss my flight. So
Mhm.
watching the championship game between UNC and Villanova, and just a couple of years ago, right? And it's crazy in that it's a moment that Jay Wright is now a broadcaster, so he gets talked about a lot with and that sort of thing. But just that buzzer beater, Archie Diacono turning around and handing the ball off, and it's just the boom and then the bang, and they show Rolly, and he's like going to have a heart attack because of this. The streamer's coming down, and it's just Jay's stoic face.
There's
There's
so
that's
many
probably
incredible buzzer beaters through the tournament.
that's the
I
one,
think
the
he's the
shot to
only
win the
one
tournament,
to actually win the tournament. A lot
and
of
it's
times it's to
incredible.
win a game and move on, but to win a championship,
Hmm.
a walk off to win a
Like that,
championship. Yeah, it, it,
can't
it
beat
was
it.
on it would be on my Mount Rushmore. It was one of the four I would have on there as well because it was against Carolina too, which
Yeah,
made it
right.
even better.
It's just the icing on the cake.
It's funny you mentioned that buzzer beater, and I think that when you look at the tournament,
Hmm.
um, football is king in America.
Yeah,
We've got football
no
every
doubt.
night of the week now. It is king. But as a kid in the backyard, there's not a ton of
Oh
walk-off football plays, right?
no,
You know,
yeah,
it's it. Granted, football has walk-off. Hail Marys are wild. That's crazy, but it doesn't lend itself to the say Freddie Freeman in the World Series coming up to bat, hitting a home run and walking off. It doesn't to the Villanova shot over Carolina. And I think that's part of what makes this so special is
yeah,
that it is different, that you do have these walk-offs. And, Leitner has multiple walk-offs through history. But you think about there's a Valparaiso, I think his name is
yeah.
Bryce Drew,
Okay,
and his brother uh, coached Baylor when they won the national championship. But he's got an iconic walk off against Ole Miss where they they throw it and he shoots. It's just geared for that, and I think
yeah. Well,
that I absolutely makes sense why
to
that's
your
your number one.
to your point too about like as a kid, think about how many times in your backyard, if you or at a park, like if you had a hoop or if you got in front of a hoop, like how many times you're counting down to yourself, shooting by
Three, two,
yourself, like
one.
3, 2, 1, and then you nail the
Yeah,
buzzer beat, or it rebounds off, and then you go do it like 6 more times until you hit it.
until you do. But think about that. That
Yeah.
kid has a literal championship walk off.
Hmm.
The only other one, um, when when um when Haywood from for Butler had a half court
Yep.
shot that rimmed out by this
That
much
much.
against Duke.
Duke. Yep.
A half court shot to win a championship would be even crazier.
Incredible. Yeah.
Because the Villanova is a legit shot. It's beautiful. He just buries it. But
That
uh,
whole like the last couple of seconds of that game,
Mhm.
like I think about the last 20 seconds and just what it was, because I mean North Carolina comes down and there's like a
They
little bit
do.
of a scramble, right? And then the
Yeah.
ball gets fumbled around, and then all of a sudden it's like a 3-point shot and it nailed it. And you thought,
And
well, that's
he
right?
has the game winner.
Right.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, it was like 2 game winners in a row. And then
And
it was just
but
crazy.
again, we'll talk the history of the
Yeah.
tournament, but like the whole idea of how it's covered is different
Right.
too, because
Oh my
one of the
goodness.
amazing things about that game is the camera on the court follows him all the
Yeah,
way up. So
the
we've got
track.
a tracking camera
Yep.
right behind him to watch as he runs down the court. There's this great pass. It gets to him. He's wide open. And like that sort of stuff. Hey, the basketball in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was great. Those guys were going at it too. But we've got one camera,
Right.
essentially. If you go back and watch some of these
A little
old
side to side
broadcasts,
from half court,
exactly,
way
that's
up
it.
high.
And that track, it followed him the whole way. It is one of the coolest shots. And that is like, wow, you know, talk about
Yeah.
transition through, how we
You
covered
never
it.
see that outside of the tournament either. That shot, maybe not even outside of the Final Four. Like I don't
It's
think you. It's like
may
specifically for the Final Four. They build that. It's almost on like a little railway,
it
and
is.
it
It's
like
like on a
slides
track.
side to side.
Yep.
And it track. I mean, I don't know if that's where the term comes from, but it tracks you down the court. Like it
It
rolls
does.
automated remote control or something. But
We have drone footage now that's amazing,
yeah,
but I don't think the drone footage of that would have been as good as
no,
watching
not
the
nearly.
play, because it was like you were a part of the play,
Awesome.
like you were in the
Yeah.
play.
You're on the
You
floor.
follow.
Could you imagine the drone flying over the court and like actually the ball hitting it and ruining the shot? Like what
That
that
would
would
be
do.
yes.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
but
Well,
to jump backwards, to
yeah,
talk about that, the history of the tournament is
that's
is pretty
fascinating,
wild
man. It's
too.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It starts in
I
1939 is
Yeah,
the
with
first
eight
one.
teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 39. It's like Oregon wins it all, maybe,
Yep.
or they get to.
Beating
It's like
beating
you know,
Ohio State for the first title.
yes.
It's crazy and it's expanded a number of times. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you think about I don't think football will get to this point, NCAA football. But you never know. Well, with 64 teams or
But it's
68
funny you
teams now,
say that because they
right? Because
started at
now they're
8
right.
and now they're at
Not even then
68.
right. They started they got up to 68. Football they started with 4. All of a sudden they're at 12. So you see where it's going. But yeah, 8 teams to 68 right now, and I think there's even talk of like expanding more,
So
which is crazy to me to think about because I thought 64 was perfect.
it's perfect.
Right? It's a pure bracket. You don't have these play-in games or whatever. I will say I've grown to love the play-in games, this first four, for a number of reasons. So if it
Hmm.
started as just the first four, it was 4 teams that played 2 games, and then they expanded it even more with like I guess it has to do with the maybe, and I know we'll talk about this too, but bracketology and everything that is because
Hmm.
you get the last four in,
Hmm.
and that has now become 2 games in and of itself, and then you got the
Yep.
2-16 play in, so first four being the first 4 games. Um, Reason I've grown to love that, aside from the fact that we've seen some of those 11-12s go on
Hmm.
runs, Syracuse being one of them. They went from an
Hmm.
11 play-in game all the way to the Final Four. That's awesome to watch. But before a 16 knocked off a one, that was the first time a 16 ever won a game
Yeah.
in the NCAA tournament. And I mean, I could think back to, at the risk of dating this podcast, last night watching St. Francis and Alabama State. And what that game was incredible. And it's
Hmm.
2 16s that, like, I wouldn't be watching that on any other given night of the season, right?
Right. Right.
And what that was, and just the Hail Mary, a walkout, right? A Hail Mary pass
That
at the
was.
end of the game, and it's like with 3.2 seconds left, and winning again, and just the jubilation on the court, like it was incredible to watch. And you
So
only get that because you have the first four.
because you have the first four here, Uncle Doug's going to tell you a story here. They had always had that. It just wasn't part of the tournament. So
Right,
like I want to say even in like 91, for example, St. Francis
right.
had played in
The
a
to
a
play the
play-in
first
game.
seed, right? There was always the
Well,
first
no, it
two
wasn't
there.
even that.
No,
You at the beginning of the season, the NCAA went these 6 conferences have the lowest RPI.
right.
You 6 have to play a game before you even get in the tournament.
Wow.
And they didn't even consider it a tournament game.
Right, right.
So like these two, like the Northeast
That's
Conference
right.
played the
Yeah.
SWAC, or and if you got beat in that game, you weren't in the tournament. And the fact that they switched it to make it like what was last night
Right.
changes everything because you're right. Now you
Does.
watch it. You didn't watch it before, and it was just you won your conference tournament, and then you had to go beat another conference champion
Yeah.
to even get in the tournament. It was bad. It
Right.
was bad. And so the fact that they eventually got to the point where like, you know what, this
Let's
is
do it.
bad. Let's
Yeah.
let's let's if we're only gonna give this many automatic berths, which I think it's 30
30.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
31 maybe.
yes,
But
maybe some, but you're gonna play these teams. This is all we're gonna give,
yep.
but we're gonna make it big, and we're gonna make it part of the tournament now,
Yeah.
so that when Alabama State wins, they now have an official NCAA tournament win. Where if this would have been in 1991, that would have just got them in the tournament. They
Right.
would not have been counted. And so that's a really cool aspect of the way things have changed. And
Now, money
yeah,
might have something to do with that.
absolutely it does.
Advertising dollars and being able to, milk a little
Absolutely.
bit more out
And
of
see, that's
corporate
an
sponsors.
interesting thing is the business
Yeah.
of this as well. To think that it wasn't even on TV.
No.
In the 60s, I think it's syndicated. Like essentially, it would be like you and I have a company, and we're like, "Hey, NCAA, we would like to showcase your final game." And then so the NCAA said, "Okay," and charged a small amount of money, and we went in and ran the production. That is unreal to even think about. And so NBC, I believe, is the first, and they come out and they're like, we'll cover the whole final four. And I think they do that in the early 70s. And it changes the game because I think in 74, I think it's NC State and UCLA had gone on this massive run. They had lost in a while. It's actually in Greensboro, and State beats UCLA in the semifinals and then beats Marquette in the championship. I think it's what it is, something like that. But anyway, it puts them on the map. Like this whole idea, they had never even shown,
It's
you
crazy.
know, college basketball tournament. I'm like, how is this possible? But so they ride the wave, and then they hit the jackpot of all jackpots in 1979 with Bird and Magic playing for a national championship. I think it's the most watched
That
as far as like
final.
uh, sporting event, as far as like
Gotcha.
the percentage of TVs.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's more people now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like the Super Bowl gets 125 million people. They didn't get that, but it was something like they got a 40 share or something like that.
Wow.
It's like 40% of the country was watching this game. It's some crazy number, but it was Bird and Magic, and the game's not good. Bird will tell you it's one of the worst games he ever played. It haunted him because he played so terrible. And they get beat by, you know, it's a 10-point game, I think, most of the game. And so they lose by 9 or 10. It's not competitive. But everybody watch Bird and Magic. And I think that's
That's a
the
I mean,
genesis
hmm
of the explosion of the tournament. Because then CBS comes in and bids a bunch of money, and they take it from NBC. And
hmm
now you as someone, you've only known CBS
hmm
covering the tournament your
and
whole
that
life.
that iconic song. Da, 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 da,
Yeah.
da, da, da. That's how you know that Big Ten tournament wraps and that
It's
music
time.
hits and it is Selection Sunday and the madness begins.
The madness begins. Yeah.
uh,
But go
Now,
ahead.
I could be wrong in this, but didn't like I know the tournament was founded in 39. Didn't like
Hmm.
the NIT's older.
Hmm.
So did that serve as the de facto championship for like a while? Did it take a couple years for it to like the when I say it for the NCAA tournament to become the national championship, or was like once it started that was because I feel like there was a time where they were both going on, but they were like competing tournaments
So here was
essentially.
always the deal is like the NCAA tournament was literally for conference champions. There were no at-large bids.
Right.
So like only the conference champion would play. And it got to the NIT would bring in other,
Hmm.
they would bring in all the at-large, and a lot of times the tournament was better.
Better than the NCAA tournament. Right.
Yes, because you still had independents at that time as
Yep.
well that maybe not were associated with the conference. And so the NIT was seen in the
As a
50s or
better
whatever
tournament.
as a better
Yeah.
tournament. I think there's even, gosh, I wish I could tell you the team, but one team actually spurns the NCAA tournament,
To
turns
go to the
down their
NIT.
bid to play
Wow.
in the NIT tournament. Yeah. Now it shifts mightily in, I think, 75. They
Yeah.
allow at-large teams, and that kills the NIT.
Well, that was so to the point of expansion. That was what 75 was the year they went to 64 teams. So,
No, no, no. It's it's
or no,
it's in the 80s that they go to
oh, I'm sorry,
64.
they doubled to 32 and 75, and then 85,
Exactly.
64. So
Yep.
that to that point though, to get the growth trajectory right here. So
Hmm.
39 was 8 teams. Then it went to 16 and 51. So 12
Hmm.
years after it started,
Yep.
you double, and then it doubles again another 24 years later.
Hmm.
So that I mean, you talk about how slow the football tournament is to
Yeah.
expand. So 24 years later, it goes to that, and then it took another 10 years for it to double again to
Yep.
64.
To 64.
And not, I mean, not only until recently. So that was what 85,
Yeah, I think in
maybe 50,
06,
what
2006, they go to 68.
Yeah. So I mean, it took a while.
It
It's
did.
another 21 years for the first four, the first yeah, the
Yeah.
first edition of this first four, and like it is what it is. And
Yeah.
um, I can't imagine what expanding again would do. And
Yeah. Um,
where does what does it is it more obviously you're adding more at large bids because it's not like there's more conferences. If anything, there's been some contraction in
right.
the conferences, and you see that craziness and where teams have gone, and Pac-12 doesn't even exist anymore. Like it's wild.
Yep.
um so I mean,
It,
it
it it
feels
hurts,
right.
but
It
it hurts
feels
who
right.
it always hurts. It hurts the mid majors.
Yeah,
We're not
absolutely.
we're not going to get any more bids, and they're going to push us further down.
Hmm.
So we're going to have to play in that first round to
Right.
get to play the major teams. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's I don't
But you
know. It's
you see the just like you talk about a team you don't like, so maybe this is an easy topic for you. Like UNC was considered an all-time shocker to be
Mhm.
in the tournament because I think they like getting a little nerdy on the stats now. Quad one wins are something that are supposed to be a major. So for those listening, you may not know what a quad one win is. The NCAA quad breaks the teams into these quads, and it's 4 levels of competition, and you've got like your top fourth of the NCAA rankings, like teams that would be those high profile teams or the best teams in the country. UNC was like 1-9, I think,
One
against
and
quad
12.
one. 1-12 it was a really bad record against quad ones. And then you had a team like Illinois who had a winning record against quad ones,
Indiana.
or Indiana. Sorry, thank you. Indiana did not make it into the tournament, and
Hmm.
weren't even the first team out. They were like the second team out.
West Virginia was the
But
first.
right, um,
Yeah,
I mean, crazy to think that they're in. So like you're pulling teeth to figure out like who goes in at
you
that
are.
point. I know those teams are upset about being left out. So like, is the you know what this sounds like? And this is young man yelling at Cloud.
Hmm.
This sounds like the participation trophies. Like, oh, you didn't get
It
in, so
does.
let's expand the tournament so that we can allow more of these
That's
teams in.
exactly what it is. And all it does is water it down. To surely to think that there are 96 teams legitimately capable of winning it,
Sounds
it's crazy.
crazy.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's driven by the almighty dollar.
Hmm.
They're going to squeeze even more out. That would be the only reason. They could not, with good faith, go, well, this was for a competitive situation because we're leaving quality teams out. It's like, no, you're not. You're leaving out mid-tier teams.
Right.
You're not leaving out quality teams.
They're gonna start
All of
having
us
teams
mid
with
majors that got in, we had to win to get in.
right.
You can take away our records because of, maybe we played a very challenging schedule. At the end of the day, we won to get in. All those teams you're talking about didn't. They lost. They lost their last game. If they would have won their last game, they would have gotten in as well, And it's like
Right.
the participation trophy is a perfect example.
Mhm.
Now it was funny that Carolina took all that
Right.
motivation and just
And turned it
destroyed.
into a 30 point just drubbing.
Yes,
Like
yes.
it was like one of those,
Which,
oh, like stop, he's dead. Like what's that
yeah, it's
Simpsons
like it was
saying, he's already dead.
the Mortal Kombat finish him.
Right,
Yeah,
right. He's already dead.
yes, but they
Oh,
did. So it'll be interesting to see their next game if they can continue on. But
right.
yeah, that's a weird aspect, but it's always been that way from
Yeah.
day one. The whole idea. that's what makes it special.
Right.
Is that it is hard to get into and it is hard to win. You're not going to luck into an NCAA championship in
No,
basketball.
absolutely
Ain't
not.
happening.
Right.
You talk about it. In 3 weeks, I'm going to play 6 games or that are all quality.
Hmm.
I may be playing an at-large team that lost, but I'm probably playing a mid-major team that won their championship. So it's winners, and you are working your way through. Hey, there's luck involved. When Virginia got beat by Maryland, uh, uh,
UMBC.
yeah, you know, the 8-9 game, they lucked out because they did not have to play Virginia. They got to play UMBC. So there is some luck involved. But at the end of the day, you're
Right.
still having to go through. It is
I mean,
still like
if it was
legit.
easy, if it was easy to win this tournament or to like know, okay, well, all higher seed wins, we'd have a perfect bracket by this point.
Somebody would have gotten
Someone
it.
would
Yeah.
have gotten a perfect bracket, and there's a reason that like several trillion brackets have been submitted
And nobody's even
and over
come
the years.
close.
No,
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 if you
there's
get the
always
first
something.
day right, it's good. But
Yeah,
and to be fair, I think since they went to 64, I can remember one year that all ones made it, but even
right.
that doesn't happen. That is
Mm-mm.
still a rare thing that, oh yeah, all the ones are going to make it. No, they're
Nope.
not.
Yeah, they'll be
You
lucky
know,
to get out of the first weekend.
it's a
you know?
challenge to get out. This is
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's another thing that makes it so great
Like
is like
there is parity, but to your point, there is the you can very easily water this tournament down. And like
you
if
could.
you expanded it to that many teams, you're talking about possibly letting some like I, I think you could find it, but like you're talking about some 500 records, and is that really,
Yeah. Is
you
that
know,
what you want? Do you
when you're
want
playing
do you
30
want the
games, do you
bowl
want to
games, right? Do you want a
right,
6-6 versus a 6-6 bowl game? Is
right.
that what you want?
And no,
And
I don't think
they would
so.
be like, oh, well, if there's more money involved,
Oh, of course.
because ESPN will give us $1 billion a year to show the first
Right.
round, or whatever it is, So I get it, but no, it's like perfect. It's a
Yeah,
perfect amount of
it
teams.
is.
It's perfectly like, okay, we got this weekend, we got next weekend, we got the weekend after that. It sets up perfectly. You would have to push this thing out another full week if you had the extra round because they're going to have to play
Right.
today and tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
And then you would make them come right back to travel to it's a lot, but
Right.
I think
If the
I think
dollar
it's
amount's
showing.
right.
It is, but I think you're
Oh,
seeing, but that's the whole idea of the business of it. You mentioned the word bracketology, which is something that would have not been
mm-mm.
in, more of a
Joe Lenardi
vocabulary.
might if they're talking about 9016, like Joe Lenardi might throw his hands up and be like, I can't do this anymore. Like I
But
said, picking
think about
68 is enough.
we jokingly talk about weathermen never happen to be right. Like Joe Lenardi
He
literally has
nails it.
made he does, but he's made a career out of just it
Yes.
doesn't really matter.
Right.
Nothing he does
Right.
matters. You
Yeah.
know,
Right. He could
it does
be
not matter.
no. No, it's
He
insane.
really has nothing that he does. I love the guy. I think it's fascinating. I think it's because I'm jealous that he created an industry that wasn't there. Somebody
Right.
else probably did. He just probably took advantage of it. But
Yeah.
think about what he's made over the 25 years
Philly
of
guy. I think he still teaches a class at St. Joe's or Temple.
yeah,
On bracketology.
how to create an industry out of thin air. But it's
Out of
everybody.
this
They
little piece
all
of
have
paper.
theirs.
Like there it
Yes,
is.
they
There it
all
is.
have their, CBS now has bracketology, and
Yeah.
the Atlantic will do their bracketology, and it was like, oh my goodness, man, this is just, this is it's
Well, it's fun
what's our
too. I have a I have a book that is the final four of everything.
oh nice.
So I'll have to I probably have it somewhere, but it like breaks down, the final four of desserts, and it's like 32 man brackets of desserts, and they all come to one. And it's just everything. But like the popularity of bracketology has resulted in just creating brackets out of everything and tournaments out of everything. And um I
But
mean
that's
it's a
that's
fun
a
time.
fascinating, Final Four. The fact that somebody came up with that term that wasn't
Well,
an
Elite
original
Eight,
term.
Sweet
Yeah,
16, you know?
Elite Eight, Sweet 16,
Yep.
and they've tried to come up with the other ones, but none of them roll off as well
No, they don't.
as Sweet 16. Something else that's you mentioned it earlier that you you just associate with the tournament is the music aspect
Mhm.
of it, and I want to say the CBS theme that you're talking about, the big guitar chord and the da 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 da. It is iconic. However, the one shining moment is amazing too. Now, I want to say '86. They had a highlight show at the end of the tournament. I think that's when
Hmm.
Louisville beat Duke, and it was I don't know if you know the theme to Patton, but it's Patton's theme, and they were showing the highlights of the tournament to Patton's theme, and Patton's theme is super cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think they had asked somebody to write something, and so the following year, maybe '87, this guy does One Shining Moment, and
Yep.
it's stuck. And then I think in the early '90s, they get maybe Luther Vandross or somebody like that to re-record it, and I think that they went with that one for a long time. But I don't even care that much about college basketball anymore, and I'll still sit there and stay up and be like, oh my gosh, give them the trophy. I just want to see One Shining Moment.
Yeah.
I just want to
Right.
hear the ball
Interesting
is
tidbit.
tipped. Yeah.
Interesting tidbit on that song. So it did. You were right. First aired after the tournament in '87. It was
Mhm.
initially scheduled to run after Super Bowl 21, but the game coverage ran long.
Wow. So
It
they
might
had
have been
built it for
this.
the Super
They built it
Bowl.
for the Super Bowl and never
That's
used it because the game
amazing.
coverage ran long. So
That's
imagine that.
awesome.
Imagine it didn't. It like the game ran on time and they ran it for that. We may have never had one shining moment for
That's incredible.
basketball. So
But
is
it's
that
funny, like
crazy?
we used to make videos and stuff as kids, and when when computer editing it came out, that was one of the first things I did was we went back and did some of my old, videos and stuff like that, and added One Shining Moment to be able to do that because it's just that's what you think of when that
Yeah,
song plays, and it's all these great things and so cool.
incredible.
What other sporting event ends that you're waiting for the highlights for the tournament? Is
Right.
there? I
The
don't.
only
I'm
other
asking.
the only other post game thing in a championship setting that I can think of is the like I'm going to Disney for the Super Bowl. Like
Which was
that's
around that same time as well. I think
right.
that's Phil Sims in
Yeah.
'86. Yeah, I'm going to Disney World. Yeah. Do they
But
still
like
do that?
yeah, so
Okay.
Jalen Hurts. It didn't
He did
happen
it.
on the field. Like, I'm sorry, it happened on the field, but like it wasn't aired live. It's a big social media
Gotcha.
thing afterwards, where, that Disney sponsors it, and because Disney, ESPN, all that sort of stuff. So,
Sure.
he goes down there, and but they have a whole thing of him. Someone ran up to him with a phone. I'm going to Disney World, and he
Okay.
does it. So it's for
But
the
that's 5 seconds.
right, not a
This
whole
is a
song.
three. This is a 3 minute song.
Right? No, there's nothing I can think of like that
You
at
know,
all.
the Stanley Cup. You
Yeah,
want to see everybody skate
the
around
handshake
with
line. Oh,
that
that
stuff is
too. Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that is because you're like waiting and they won't touch it until and then you get it and you're like, okay, that's
Who
a
are they
pretty
going to
cool
hand it
moment.
to?
Yeah,
Right?
but it is not. It doesn't have a song to go along
No,
with it. It should
no.
have some sort of strange brew music, some sort of hoser song or something. But
Some Canadian.
they
Uh,
they should be playing,
right.
Tom Sawyer by Rush as they, that would be amazing.
Oh my God. So, eras of the tournament.
Yeah.
Um, like when is it at its peak now? Like it's awesome now. I truly think it is. But like, you think back to the history of it.
hmm
This our twisted era spin. What do we
Yeah.
got?
So like, I think the coverage is awesome now. I don't think the game is as good as it was, and it has nothing to do with the kids. They're extremely talented. They're just not. They're playing now in the NBA as opposed
Mhm.
to sitting here for 3 years. So that is where I struggle. I can go back to that '90 UNLV team and I can name off four players. I can't name off four total players in the entire college basketball
Yeah.
universe. I know the Cooper Flag kid.
Yeah.
That's it. That is, I don't even know any of the kids on UNCW.
Mm.
And I can name the starting five for the UNLV team from 1990. And I think that's a problem. The
Yeah.
fact that you don't know who any of these people are anymore. And that's a me problem. I get it because I don't watch. But that's part of the reason I don't watch because I don't have any association with
Right.
them.
There's no
You know,
attachment.
I there is no attachment. My mom, will be like, "Where is where's Rob Stott?" I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mom. Rob Stott left Wake. He transferred to Duquesne." Why would he do that? I was like, "Because he can now." And so, that's where it really, those people who have been watching this their entire life and know
Yeah.
that, hey, Rob's going to be with us for 4 years, and he was
Right.
not that good as a freshman, and now he's an All ACC player. That's gone. and it's bad.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of the coverage and the pools and stuff like that. But let's say from Michael Jordan hitting that shot in '92 to Christian Laettner hitting the shot, Michael Jordan in '82 and Christian Laettner in '92, that's got to be like the best 10-year run of college basketball because the
Yeah.
players, Jordan, Patrick Ewing,
Yeah.
the Grant Hills, you just, I'm sorry. Those are just incredible players. Anthony Hardaway, these guys that would just go on to be
Right. They don't
amazing. And
develop like they all think one and dones or I know Calipari has a great run of just
sure,
having these kids come and nurturing them for a year and getting them NBA ready. It's
yep,
like it's a stepping stone as opposed to a place where you develop and hone your
yeah.
craft and get
And
good
and I'm
and
gonna
then go
be
get drafted.
honest. I would rather play for Kentucky than for random NBA team. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Especially in the era of the NIL where I'm
Right.
going to actually make a little money.
Yeah.
Why would I not want to keep playing for Kentucky for $1 million as
Yeah.
opposed to, I don't even know who the NBA random Memphis? Why would I want to play for Memphis
Right.
or whoever for $1 million a year? I'm sorry. I would much rather be in college than be in the NBA. And I just, I don't know. They see the
Lucrative
max deal.
contracts, right?
Yeah, they see that.
It's
Ooh, if I in 5 years I could be making $300 million, and hey, I get it. But you're also like, it has really changed the
yeah.
game. So I
I
am
I agree with you.
I've got to go with that '80s
Yeah.
'90s era because I think it says its purest form. We still have people leave early.
Yeah.
We talk about. Chris Webber is only at
Hmm.
Michigan for 2 years. So, I mean,
It
people
happens.
left early.
Yeah.
Jordan left after three. It did still happen, but I don't know. It was just different.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
but I'm going to go that era. It just has to be,
I agree with you from
shocking.
the I'll break it into two. There's the fan experience and the basketball experience.
Hmm.
And the basketball experience, you're nailing it. Like that is when it was at its peak. I don't
Hmm.
think you had better games. I don't think you had better moments. There's a reason anytime you see an NCAA highlight or like, a replay of the biggest moments in the tournament, there's a few from recent years and what's going on and like it may be a big upset, it may be this and maybe that. Um, but the bulk of the highlights of the tournament happen in that date range that you're mentioning.
Yep.
It's just there's so many iconic things that happen because there were so many icons in the NCAA that were
Hmm.
playing basketball at that time at the collegiate level. So I don't think you can argue at all that the basketball was, at its peak at any other point. Um, the fan experience, I
Yeah.
100% better now. I mean, you get
100%.
it's crazy to watch. There's so much excitement. The coverage is incredible. The brackets are just like they suck you in and don't let you go.
Yep.
So from it for the casual out there, I think
Hmm.
today is a much better era to enjoy college basketball because you can it's like a soap opera. You can come back every year. You don't have to watch from October to the end of February. You can dive
Hmm.
in on Selection Sunday and just go, follow
Start
along
then.
and take
Yep.
take take part in the annual extravaganza that is March Madness. But it's just pick your
Well,
flavor. Like, what do you
yeah,
want? Do you
I
want a really
will.
good basketball or a really good fan experience?
I'll piggyback off of your thought there. In 2000, UNCW won the Colonial Championship, got their first NCAA bid. Huge deal. We'd been in Division One for over about 20 years and had come close, but that was it, and it was massive. I still, the T-shirt didn't fit, but I was going to wear that T-shirt. 2000 champs. We ended up drawing
Should have cut
Cincinnati.
it. You should have cut it off.
Should have cut it off, no sleeves. There we go. So we draw Cincinnati as a 15 seed. They're going to be a 2 seed. It wasn't broadcast.
Mm,
Could not watch it. Watched like like refreshing the stats, type deal.
yeah,
Uh, it was on,
like a game
but
cast or whatever.
yeah, you had to pay for it or something to that
Mhm.
effect back then. The sheer fact that every single
Yeah.
game is on
This
and
is
they're not,
like this is
that's big.
This is True
Y-
TV's time to shine, right?
Hey,
Like,
yeah,
who has True TV? I don't know, but
yes.
I might come mid March. I know.
It's
So,
like it's like True
you know,
TV's numbers are like this, and then right
right
back
back
to
down.
this. You got Impractical Jokers and NCAA Tournament, right? But so I completely agree with everything you're saying. I still remember that not being able to watch that because
Yeah,
it wasn't broad and it was probably not broadcast. You know, maybe Carolina was on and they're going to trump. You know, we got one game on CBS. That's what we're going to get, and it makes sense. But the fact that now when they get in, it's no question about it. It's like, oh, it's going to be on True TV or it's going to be on TNT or it's going to be on
yep,
TBS or CBS. So that's a big deal.
yeah,
So I completely agree. I just, you know, I think it's great to put them into two
yeah,
boxes, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, the gameplay was better, but the whole fan
Well,
experience is tough to beat today.
well, hey, I wish your what's the mascot? Oh God, it's gonna bother me. What's your mascot? Seahawks.
So it's yeah, I was
Seahawks.
gonna say it's very
Yeah, it's right
similar to
by
yours in
right,
Philadelphia.
right. It's a
We could
bird. I knew
sing
it
your
was a bird.
song. We could
Also,
be
you
fly,
right,
Seahawks
Seahawks fly.
fly. It
Best
works
well,
perfectly.
right? Best of luck
Yes,
to your Seahawks. I know they got a tough road ahead of them, but hey, I hope you
brutal.
get to enjoy it and
Yeah.
just appreciate it for what it is. And to all you bracket busters out there,
Hope you're not getting your bracket
right?
busted too early, right?
Yeah, I know. Uh, Good luck, Godspeed, and let's have some fun with this March Madness time of year. But until next time, keep it twisted.